telepathy is not only related to humans. It can also be related to animals, such as cats and dogs and fish and turtles and snails and pumas and jaguars and tigers and pretty much every other animal.
Telepathy from people to animals usually occurs when there are close emotional bonds. This may well be an important factor in human telepathy too. My own hypothesis is that there are bonds between the fields that link together members of a social group called social fields. There are one type of more general class of fields called morphic fields. These bonds continue to link members of the social group together even when they are far apart. Beyond the range of sensory communication and can serve as a medium through which telepathic communications can pass. The alternatives to the idea of morphic fields are the theories of telepathy and ESP discussed later on.
Among the better cases of animal telepathy, or animal-to-man telepathy, is one furnished novelist H. Rider Haggard in the Journal of Society for Psychic Research, October 1904. Mrs. Haggard heard her husband groaning and emitting inarticulate sounds like the moaning of a wounded animal during the night of June 7, 1904. She woke her husband and told her his dream. At first, the novelist not only remembered having experienced a sense of grievous oppression, as though he was endangered of suffocation. Because the movements were heard by his wife's voice, in which he regained full consciousness, the dream became more vivid. He stayed and saw Good Bob, his dog, lying on his side among the bushfire by water. My personality seemed to me by arising in some mysterious manner of the body of a dog. He lifted his head in a natural angle against my face. Bob was trying to speak to me, he said, and not being able to make himself understood by sound, transmitting my mind in an undefined fashion, acknowledging that he would die. Bob was found dead 4 days later, floating in the river, his skull crushed in, and his legs broken. He had been struck by a train on a bridge and thrown into the water. His blood-stained collar was found in the bridge on the morning after the dream. In William J. Long, in his book on How Animals Talk in 1922, produced many examples of telepathic faculty in animals. He notes that the mother wolf cannot head off a runway cub because there is too much distance between them. She sometimes stops quiet, lifts her head high, and looks steadily into the running cub. He will suddenly halter, haul squirrel, and speed back to the pack. Famous case of Albert horses suggests that telepathy may occur between animals and humans, and Edmund Sloan in his book Thought Transfer of What in Birds in 1931. Records many observations of the subject from bird life. Another example of telepathy is how your pet can know when you're coming home, even when you're miles away. Have you ever noticed when maybe your parents or someone else is coming home and your pets know it 5 minutes before the car gets there? Well, that could be an example of telepathy, although we cannot prove it. Hugh J. Brown's book, The Holy Truth, contains the story of his 2 sons who drowned, one in a communication through the medium George Springs, told a detailed story of their fatal pleasure cruise, and added that his brother's arm had been torn off by a great shark. This information could not have been telepathically conveyed by anybody living, except by the shark. Yet it was found to be true. The shark had been caught 2 days later, and the men testified to Sir Arthur Conan Doyle that he had cut the shark open and found an arm, part of a waistcoat, and a watch, which were identified belonging to the dead youth. The watch had stopped at the exact hour where the brothers were engulfed by the sea.
Lisa and Debbie Gans run a promotional agency that claims many thousands of twins on the books, a rich source of unscientific yet fascinating anecdotes about telepathy.
Twins have so many stories of telepathy and feeling each other's pain and happiness. We have had
experiences.
Lisa was living in Australia.
I was living in Australia, halfway around the world.
And I was living in New York City.
And Debbie was living in New York. And I actually got in a serious car accident in the middle of nowhere, in the middle of the outback.
On a dark, deserted road, Lisa's car hit a cow and spun out of control. Debbie, some 10,000 miles away, says she knew instantly her sister was in trouble.
I looked at my mother and I said, something's wrong.
There's this intangible feeling that you can't actually explain to other people. And even when I had the accident, before anybody had, contacted or we had gotten to somewhere we can make phone calls, she had already been calling all of my friends that lived in Sydney.
Did anyone talk to her? Because
I
I never had such an intense feeling of somewhat like pain, but it wasn't my pain. It was her pain, so I couldn't verbalize it, so it must have been my sister.
It's a perfect example of when you call it, you have a sixth sense.
Even if we're not together, the experiences are shared through a connection that we can't explain.
So when Debbie goes out on a date and has a good time, then I just stay home and feel it.
Oh, that's really nice.
A touch telepath can communicate directly with the mind of another being, but only with physical contact. The Vulcan mind meld is a form of touch telepathy. Melding is not strictly telepathic because those in a meld go beyond mere communication of thoughts. They share consciousness in a kind of gestalt. Physical contact is usually necessary. In extreme circumstances, however, Vulcans have been able to conduct mind meld over short distances. For example, Commander Spock of the USS Enterprise did so twice in control guards outside the detention cell and once to establish contact with Horta. Also, Lieutenant Tuvok of the USS Voyager was able to speak telepathically with a race of non-touch telepaths, though he did not have to touch in order to do a full mind meld. Telepathy is possible because of the sentient mind itself is independent of the brain. It exists as a field of energy in space, and the brain functions by simply turning in to its field like a radio tuning in to the energy signal from the station. The DNA serving a similar capacity. The body's bioenergy field acts as an antenna, a bridge to the mind field that stores all aspects of your consciousness. This being the case, each mind has its own separate field. While existing in the same space, each field has effectively separated in other minds, by virtue of having the same different frequency, one unique to itself.